Good evening and welcome. I'm Steve Levingston, nonfiction editor of the Washington Post, which is a charter sponsor of the National Book Festival. Before we begin, I've been asked to remind you that these events are being recorded by the Library of Congress, which may broadcast them at some future date. After our author's presentation, there will be time for questions, but if you don't want to become part of the library's permanent collection, it may be best to let someone else ask the questions. Douglas Rushkoff spends a lot of time thinking about our digital lives, where we are now, where we're heading, and he's concerned. During a radio interview, he once was asked, "What is it you're most concerned about? What scares you? What keeps you up at night?" And he said, "Instead of people using technology, technology is using people." As a media theorist, author, and teacher, Rushkoff is concerned about how the digital age is affecting not just each one of us individually, but the nature of society. He worries that people have lost the ability to think and connect and act in constructive ways. In a world dominated by technology, we've become isolated from one another. The solution, he argues, requires nothing less than a remaking of modern life. And that's the subject of his latest book, Team Human. Our Washington Post reviewer called it a manifesto for change. In the book, Rushkoff contends that our technologies are, in his words, paralyzing our ability to connect meaningfully or act purposefully. His solution is for us to understand that, as he puts it, we cannot be fully human alone. We must recognize, he says, that being human is a team sport. His vision is not apocalyptic, but hopeful. He wants us to understand that we do not have to surrender ourselves to technology. He's not telling us to toss our cell phones into the Potomac, just use them a little more wisely, and maybe a little less. Rediscover real social interaction. Choose to meet up face-to-face instead of texting. Sit across from each other and talk. Connect without digital technology. Connect as humans. Well, Rushkoff has much, much more to say about all this, and he'll say it much better than I do. So please join me in welcoming Douglas Rushkoff.
Gosh, thanks a lot for that. That's humbling. Just someone from the Washington Post knows who I am. And that's a custom intro, right? A custom intro written by a real human who actually looked at stuff about me. So it's humbling. It's not always the case. It's funny, the thing that got me on the map most recently was this TED Talk I did where I was recounting having been invited to do a talk for what I thought was this, a bunch of investors or whatever about the digital future, what people like me get called to do. And I was waiting in the green room to go on, and these 5 guys were brought into the green room with me. And it turned out there was no talk at all. They just sat around the table in the green room and started asking me these questions about the future, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? Virtual reality or augmented reality. Like they wanted to know, what to bet on. And then eventually they got around to the real question of concern, which was Alaska or New Zealand. Right? They wanted strategies on where to put their doomsday bunkers, for the event or whatever was going to happen that would wipe out civilization as we know it. And the question they ended up spending the majority of the hour on, which was really telling for me, was how do I maintain control of my security force after the event? Right? Because their money would be worthless. And they were concerned that their staff, their security staff, might not defend them when the throngs come. The security guys might just take over. I told them jokingly they should just pay for the security staff leader guy's daughter's bat mitzvah or something now, that the guy later would then remember and not want to kill you. But it revealed something about the way these people think. Right, that they are the wealthiest, most powerful technology kingpins in the world, yet they feel utterly powerless to influence the future. Right, that the best thing they can do is prepare for the inevitable collapse and arm themselves against us, right? Separate themselves, either get a rocket ship or something to get away from humanity. And I was reminded of that episode because the one other experience I've had with billionaires in my life was I was invited to my literary agent, used to be famous for throwing these billionaire dinners. And they were dinners where they would have the biggest scientists, living scientists, like, Crick and Watson and Dawkins and all the scientists, and then like Steve Case and, Jeff Bezos and those guys at these dinners. And I got invited to one of them, right? And the problem was, it was funny, it was me and Naomi Wolf. I don't know if you know her, a feminist author. And it was she and I were arguing against 20 or 30 scientists, and we were arguing that there's something else going on here besides what science, cause and effect science can explain. That there's something animating humans, that consciousness is a mystery, that there's some strange thing, dare we call it soul, animating life. And they just ridiculed and teased us for this. And finally, I was arguing that, that there's reason to be ethical in this world, to be compassionate with one another, and it leads to a better, it changes the way that the universe works if we treat each other nicely and well. And then they all accused me of being a moralist. That's the word they used. Oh, you're a moralist, as if that's dismissive. And now I find out that these same scientists were going on the plane to Epstein's Island on the Lolita Express. Not that it's directly connected, but I'd rather be a moralist than an amoralist. Right? And that's my fear about where technology, and as long as we're here, and science mean to take us in an amoral direction if we don't retrieve and bring our humanity along with us on this techno-scientific journey that we're on. That the religion of science has become a religion of control. And it's not just recently that it's done it. As I look at the original science text, the invention of the scientific model, Francis Bacon, back in the Renaissance, that Francis Bacon defined science. And I know he's a great man and did all this great stuff, but he defined science as our ability to finally take nature by the hair, hold her down, and subdue her to our will. So the original metaphor for science is a rape and control fantasy. It makes sense on a certain level, right? These guys were all scared of women and darkness and nature and animals and feelings and stuff. So science, we're going to just, like the Enlightenment itself, we're going to cast light on all these dark places and make them light and evident to us. And we're going to quantify everything. Once we have a number for it, it exists, it's scientific, and it's real. If it doesn't have a quantity, if we can't quantify it, it may as well not be here. And this was a vast but comforting oversimplification of the world we live in. We're seeing this ethos retrieved and amplified by digital technology and the digital ethos. The digital ethos is to quantize everything. Everything is either here or there. It's like the Snap 2 grid on a graphics program, or when you're recording digital music. You don't have the space between this sample and that sample. You can sample lots of little samples, but it's blank between each one. Right? There's a number. It's either here or here, here or here. If it doesn't fall on one of the quantized marks, it doesn't exist. So technologists will say, oh, technology is neutral. It's all totally neutral. It's just how we use it. Right? We could use it for good or use it for bad. No, technology is not neutral. It is a quantized symbol system. You could say guns don't kill people. People kill people. Yeah, but guns are more biased toward killing people than, say, pillows. Right? You can kill someone with a pillow, right? But it's not biased toward that. right? And all of digital technology is biased in a certain way, the same way an MP3 file of a song is not the song. An MP3 file of a song is a symbol system representing a song in ways that fool the ear into thinking it's listening to the song. But you're not listening to the song. You're listening to an MP3 file. It's a different thing. And partly, this is a market phenomenon. It dovetails really nicely with the needs of the market. And we don't have time to really get into it, but in the late Middle Ages, before the Enlightenment, before the Renaissance, before central currency, before the corporation, before chartered monopolies, we had the beginnings of the same kind of peer-to-peer marketplace that we saw at the beginning of the internet. It was like an eBay-like economy where people were trading things back and forth with each other. They had local currencies that were optimized for transaction. And the former peasants of feudalism were starting to get wealthy, which is why it had to be ended. It had to be squashed. And we ended up getting central currency, which is really an extractive, growth-based operating system. Central currency means that one bank in the middle lends money to people if they want to transact, but they have to pay back more than they borrowed. What does that build into the operating system? Growth. You need to grow in order for the economy to work. And so we moved from kind of an eBay economy to a PayPal economy, where the people making money were the people making money off our transactions, rather than by enabling our transaction. And the people who make money in this economy are not the people who are creating and exchanging value. They're the people one level of abstraction removed from it. It's the people doing the finance on top of it. And if you don't believe that, look at what just happened to the New York Stock Exchange. The New York Stock Exchange has been purchased by its derivatives exchange. What does that mean? It means the New York Stock Exchange, which is already an abstraction of the marketplace, which is already an abstraction of people transacting, has been consumed by its own abstraction. That's a weird place to go. Right? That's weird to go. And that's, in some ways, what this desire so many of us have now to return to permaculture and indigenous logic and crop rotation, all these things that seem so much more real. Human contact, eye contact, people in spaces with one another. It's because we have a sense that these abstractions are consuming us, just like all of our zombie movie fantasies. We're being consumed by this thing, and it's a little scary. It's strange. You know, the Native Americans, on encountering white European people for the first time, colonialists who were ripping down forests and killing people and raping people and making slaves and enslaving others, they had so much faith in humans that they didn't even see us as bad. They thought we had a disease. They called it Wetico, which was a spiritual disease that made us want to just take things and destroy things, to colonialize. And we've colonized, and we've colonized for 600 years. You know, we colonized really well right up, and my brother wrote a lot about Eisenhower, right up until about Eisenhower's presidency. That was when all the colonies started pushing back, really, right after World War II. It's like, no, you can't colonize anymore. We're done. We want to be our own nations. So what happened? It's interesting. The technologist from the war, Vannevar Bush, one of the men responsible for computers and cryptography, he wrote an essay for Atlantic, the Atlantic magazine, called As We May Think. And it looks like it's basically a pitch for computers. He's saying, we can take these technologies that we used for war and now use them to grow the economy. That even though you can't colonize any more territory, we can colonize human consciousness. We can colonize human time. And these machines will basically colonize memory. So what we've done, and now we see it really with the surveillance economy, with the extractive surveillance economy of Google and Facebook, that we're doing Wetico to ourselves. We are colonizing our own consciousness. We're colonizing our own time. That we're experiencing ourselves, even if we're just human. We are now the indigenous species of the planet being colonized by our own digital abstractions. That we're being consumed by our digital devices the same way the New York Stock Exchange was consumed by ultra-fast trading and algorithms. And what does that look like? Well, what it looks like is a world where humans are no longer the users of our technology, we are the used. Right? We are not the message, we are the medium. We are being played. There's been a reversal of figure and ground. You know, your smartphone gets smarter about you every time you swipe it, and you get dumber about it. And if you want to get smart about it, you'll go in there and find out, oh, all these are proprietary algorithms in black boxes that I'm legally prevented from even finding out what my phone is doing to me. Well, it knows everything. It's on right now. It knows where we go. It knows what we do. Just try turning that off. There's what used to be computer science at Stanford, there's a division now called Captology, run by a guy named B.J. Fogg. The Captology department at Stanford is teaching how to make these devices addictive. That's where the streak feature on Snapchat came from. They take the algorithms from Las Vegas slot machines and use them to make our news feeds more addictive. It's not conspiracy theory, it's what they do. There's a book, How to Take the Algorithms of Las Vegas Slot Machines and Put Them in Your news feed. You know, Facebook, we all know how Facebook works, right? It's not there to help us make friends. Facebook takes the data from your past and uses it to put you in a statistical bucket, then fills your news feed with things to make you more likely to behave consistently with your consumer profile. It's not about advertising to you anymore. It's about getting you to be true to who you're supposed to be. They are auto-tuning us, essentially. Now, my problem with auto-tuning is that it no longer recognizes the most important part of the singer. What makes the singer matter is not that they hit a F sharp. It's how did they get to that F sharp? Did they come up from under it? Did they come down from over it? Quantizing it, no. I mean, where's James Brown in an auto-tune universe? It's gone. Now, what's that stuff called by the technologists? That reaching up for the note, that coming down over the note? That's called noise. Where I come from, that's the signal. That's the human. That's the part that we're trying to erase. And the well-meaning folks now who are finally from the computer industry, finally saying, oh, you know, we've made some problems here. These technologies are kind of screwing people up. What did they start? They started something called the Center for Humane Technology. It's a really nice phrase. Humane technology. It's like, makes me think of when the labeling on cage-free chicken eggs, right? We were humane to these chickens all the way from birth to their slaughter. The problem is, again, the figure and ground are reversed. Humane technology is about how the technology is treating the humans rather than how the humans are using the technology. We're going to use captology for good. You know, they're just really trying to soften digital industrialism while staying invested in all of those companies. And I'm not going, that's why I'm promoting this team human idea. No, be human. Humans are not compatible with exponential growth of the marketplace. Digital technology is compatible with exponential growth because it's exponential. Humans are not. We're here. There's one instance of me. You know, and it ends up, this exponential idea is perfect. When you have exponential scientists with exponential digital developers with exponential billionaires, they all support one another's religious fantasy. And that's how we get the chief scientist at Google believing and working towards the day when technology surpasses human beings. They call it the singularity. I was on a panel with one of these guys, and he was talking about how human beings should just pass the evolutionary torch to our digital successors, accept our inevitable extinction with humility. And I said, no, human beings are special, we're weird. I gave the whole thing about how we live in the liminal spaces between yes and no and 1 and 0, that human beings are special and all about our noise, that we can watch a David Lynch movie and not understand what it means and still experience that as pleasurable. Right? Computers can't do that. They can't sustain paradox like we can. And he said, oh, Rushkoff, you're just saying that because you're a human, right? Like it was hubris. And that's when I said, fine, I'm on Team Human. You know, guilty, Team Human, it's fine. And I will fight for Team Human. Now, I do believe we deserve a place in the digital future. It's not a matter of getting rid of technology. It's a matter of retrieving human values and embedding them in the techno-scientific future. And the real values, like you alluded to, the real human values, and it was a coincidence that I said team human, but being human is a team sport. It's something that we do together. You know, there's a bastardized misinterpretation of Darwin going around that evolution is the story of survival of the fittest individual in competition with all the others. No, if you actually read the Darwin, what he's saying, what he's marveling at page after page is the way that different species collaborate and cooperate in order to ensure mutual survival. They told me in middle school, John, I don't know if you were in my middle school too, in Cooper House, they told us, when they taught us evolution, that trees are competing for sunlight, and that the big tree gets the sunlight, shades the little tree, which then dies. Turns out that's not true. The big tree is sharing nutrients with the little tree through a network of mycelium in the soil, which turns out to be alive. When the big tree loses its leaves in the winter, the little tree, which is usually an evergreen, passes the nutrients back up to the big tree. Right, they're actually working together through systemic forces that don't quite fit into the simple dissecting cause and effect science of Francis Bacon or Google or the zombie-worshipping Google scientists. No, there is an intelligence to nature and to one another that is rendered inaccessible by technology. That is okay, as long as we can accept that quantifying the entirety of reality, even with good intentions, will only cut us off from each other and from life itself. Okay, thank you. That was the right amount? All right, good. So we have time for oh wow, change. I'm sorry for the rapidity. That was I was talking really fast. I felt bad about that for you, but I had so much to say. So we get to talk with each other. Do people have questions, concerns? Yeah. I was in Cooper House. You were? But let me ask you about the point you were getting to, I think. Oh, we have two beautiful microphones for people who want one here and one there.
Excellent. Let me ask you about a point I think you were getting to at the end there, which is the goal of trying to, I think as you were saying, implant human values in this technology-driven future. So what are some of the ways that you think we can do that? Because I think, like you, a lot of us feel as though the technology is sort of controlling us, and it's hard to imagine how to have the strength and strategic wherewithal to carry those human values forward into this more and more technology-dominated world.
Education is one place to start. I mean, I was talking about the reversal of figure and ground. Education is a terrific example of a modern reversal of figure and ground, of cause and effect. Education, public education, was originally born, believe it or not, it was born as compensation for workers. The idea was that these guys are working in the coal mines all day. They deserve the human dignity of being able to return home and read a novel and understand what it said, or read the newspaper and participate in democracy. So it was about compensation. It was about human dignity. Now, what is education? Education is to help someone get a job. So we have the principals of high schools and presidents of universities meeting with the CEOs of corporations to find out, what do you want our students to know? Do you want them to know Excel? Or do you want them to know blockchain? Should they learn Python? Should they learn Java? What do you want in your future worker? As if the public school system is now an externality for worker training by the market. And what do kids get? They end up squishing all that liberal arts, all that critical thinking, all of those human things that you should learn in the luxury of a public education system go away, so we can learn nothing against science, but so we can learn STEM, not even STEAM. So we can learn STEM and then have great jobs and go into the market. So that's one. Second is we are denying young people the value of engagement and mimesis in the classroom, that live encounter. I've been teaching at Queens College. It's a City University of New York, public college in New York for the last 5 years. So every single semester, I get more notes on the first day of class from the student will hand me a note from their psychiatrist that says, please excuse Johnny from class participation because he's got social fears, or don't make him do any presentations or anything like that. And I'm thinking, what happened to this kid K through 12? What were they doing in the classroom? They were putting the kid on the friggin' iPad and teaching them some fact so they could do an assessment also on the iPad of what knowledge and data and statistic of thing that they got. But what they didn't get was the experience of learning. But the beauty of being in a classroom with a teacher is not what the teacher is telling you factually. It's not the content. The medium, like McLuhan would say, the medium is the message. In a classroom, the student gets to model the behavior of somebody who's dedicated their lives to learning. What does a learning person look like and sound like and act like? They're modeling the teacher. That's mimesis. That's the way we actually develop as humans. So now we grow up, we're unable to establish rapport. We spend all our time on trying to talk to people on Skype or on video. You can't see if their pupils are getting bigger or smaller, if their breathing is syncing up with yours. All of the painstakingly evolved mechanisms for social cohesion and cooperation are defeated in this environment, and then we end up getting off the call. The person says they agreed with me, but I didn't feel it in my body. My mirror neurons didn't fire. My oxytocin didn't go through my blood. And now, rather than blaming the technology, I don't know from technology, not on a body level, I blame the other person. I think that person's less trustworthy. And then the feedback loop continues. I start appreciating and respecting the tech, and I start looking at people more and more and more suspiciously. So it's basically, human rapport is a prerequisite to solidarity, which is the prerequisite to power. We can't develop rapport if we're afraid of each other. So it starts in education, but then for us, spend real time in real places with real people. The word conspiracy literally means conspire, breathe together. It's funny that breathing together with other people is now considered conspiracy. That's the way we think of it, but that's it. That's how Team Human organizes. That's how we foist our little revolution against these stultifying anti-human forces, is as simple as having the courage, to look someone else in the eyes again.
Thank you.
But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to, yeah.
Hi, thank you for joining us.
Hey.
So it seems like throughout all of human history, there have been some individuals or groups that were fine with treating other human beings as livestock or a feeding source.
Yeah.
And that technology has enabled those people, perhaps supercharged their ability to do that on a massive worldwide scale, while also getting those people who are being used to thank them. I'm very curious about your thoughts on universal human value, and in an economy where people are frequently valued based on their ability to produce money, how that works, and is there anything that we can do to try and recognize the value of all people? Some people throw universal basic income into that bucket, taking money away from tech transactions and putting them into the pockets of real life people so that they can interact, make art, do whatever. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is not new to digital technology. If you look at the first uses, Library of Congress is here. Look at the first uses of written text. It was to keep track of people's possessions and slaves. And so it turbocharged slavery. You could only really run a good slave empire if you were able to keep track of it in writing. So it's since the beginning, literacy, technology, it's what, you're right, it's what it always tends to turbocharge first. Is, well, not at the very beginning, but soon after it gets used for these more nefarious purposes. Yeah, and I hate to get religious on you, particularly when we're on the science stage, but there's a kind of a Mr. Rogers-like simplicity to respecting the dignity of other human beings, to teaching kids you're okay just the way you are, without doing anything. I feel like what happened in the beginning of the industrial age, once we shifted from being craftspeople who made stuff and went to the market and exchanged with other people, and those businesses were basically made illegal through a process of chartered monopolies, now we had to go to the city and work for a chartered monopoly. We were selling our time rather than the value that we created. That's when human beings became valued for our utility value rather than any essential value. And the scientists will tell you there is no such thing as essential value. When I talk about essential value, they call me an essentialist, which is supposed to be a bad thing, right? That there's something here that we have intrinsic worth. And you sound a little like a yang ganger on the UBI.
Guilty.
Yeah, which is all right. I mean, and he's right. If you actually get to the place where you realize we have all our politicians talking about getting people jobs. We want to get people jobs. Why? Because there's this work that needs to be done? That's not why we want to get people jobs. We have houses in California that we are right now tearing down, even though there's homeless people, because those houses are in foreclosure. The USDA burns food every week because we can't just dump it on the market or prices will go down while people go hungry. So the reason to have a job is not because we need more houses built or we need more food grown. The reason to have a job is so that they can justify letting you participate in the spoils of capitalism. So they'll figure out some ridiculous plastic doodad for you to make in a factory for other people. We'll make TV commercials to convince people that they need this thing and make them feel awful about themselves in the process, make them buy the thing and then throw it out and stick it in landfill, and then Greta's got to come from Denmark and tell us we're all going to die. So you know what I mean? There's an ass backwardsness to that, right? So UBI, and the reason why, and for much of my career I've supported UBI, the idea if we've got the stuff, just let people have it. And I loved the idea of UBI, and right until I went to Uber and started talking about all this stuff, and the guys at Uber said, oh, we love UBI because then we can not pay our drivers anything, because they're going to be getting universal basic income. It's the sort of the Walmart model of let's pay our people, this much so they go on social service. So it's tricky. But yeah, if we respected basic human dignity, it'd be a lot easier. And right now, it's funny, in the early internet days we did, there was a moment when, in the early internet days, when people would do this thing called anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism is where you see the human being in your technology. So they'd put little rabbit ears on their Mac Classic computer and see it as this little person and give it a name and all that. And now we've gotten so far into tech, we're not doing anthropomorphism. We're doing what I'm calling mechanomorphism, where it's, yeah, I want to give him a second to say it. Mechanomorphism, where we see ourselves, we want to make ourselves more like machines. I can't process that. I'm multitasking. That's the way we view ourselves, and we aspire to be more computer-like. And that's because we think our value is our utility value. And so it's going to come down, it may come down to the way we raise our kids, the way we teach them in school. It feels like it's so, our sense of self-worth no longer feels intrinsic. It's like, what have you done for me today? And what I'm trying to do is help people see that, no, you're great. You are just great right now. Do nothing. That you're that's why sitting is so great. Meditating is great, because you're just here, you are really, and it's not saying you're spoiled or whatever, but no, you've paid the price of admission already for getting through the birth canal, right? You're here, you should be celebrated just for your existence. And once you start with that, you're starting no longer at a deficit. You're starting with a surfeit, and then it kind of it changes. But obviously it's not just about you. It's something we have to do together. But I agree. That's the essential challenge of our time. That's why I'm arguing. I'm not arguing about what we do with tech. People always ask, how do I do this? How do I do that? And what do we make tech? And how do we change the OS and all? And it's let someone else's problem. I don't want to think about it from the technology side of the equation. I want to think about how do we increase our sort of immune response? What's the more homeopathic approach rather than the allopathic hit the disease? How do we strengthen our human fiber? How do we increase our sense of value in the human project itself? And that's by connecting with nature, connecting with women, connecting with family and neighborhood and community, and something else opens up. It's just that digital is so bad for intimacy. It's so bad for it. And slowly over time, kids raised on this stuff prefer it. They'll prefer even the internet porn to the real thing, because internet porn, it's dry, it's easy, it's no one to deal with, no mystery. And once we're preferring this to that, then really that's game over. To use a screenager word for it. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the cautionary tale. I feel like I've watched every Black Mirror episode 5 times over. You did sort of say that you're focusing on the human or on the person, but do you have any thoughts on what, if we don't give up technology, on what it could look like where it wouldn't be negative? Or have you seen any technologists that actually are looking to design in a way that isn't just to make something that's horribly addictive?
Yeah, I mean, the whole challenge is you're 19, 20, 21 years old, you're in college, you come up with an idea for a great app that's really going to help people and do these wonderful things. Then you take some VC, and all of a sudden this guy wants you to pivot to something that's completely different and extractive. I mean, I still think if Mark Zuckerberg hadn't turned to Peter Thiel for money, the Facebook might have ended up being a social network, which would have been interesting. I'm thinking that what we should do is use the tactic with engineering schools that radical libertarian right-wing capitalists used with economy schools. They pretty much all economics departments ended up dominated by extremely right-wing money and grew economists who think of things in pretty extractive, monocurrency, monocultural ways. If we invested in technology departments and tried to get to plant ethics teachers and teachers of humanism and human values in technology departments, then we could kind of seed that world with human values rather than just money-making values. The other sign of hope I see is that a lot of young people are they've seen what happened to the first and second generation of technology developers, and now they're trying to develop technology, take less venture capital at lower valuations. Right? The big joke is the lower the valuation you take for your company, the less money you have to pay back, the less money you have to earn. And they finally kind of put that equation together in their head, so that's letting them develop technologies. This is when I go to talk to these kids, this is what I always say is, look, would you be happy just having tens of millions of dollars? Could you make yourself okay with tens of millions rather than hundreds of millions or $1 billion? If you're okay with tens of millions, you can develop really differently fun stuff that's good for people. If you have to pivot, if you're going to do a good thing for humanity and make $1 billion, it may not be possible. And if you take the $1 billion like Zuckerberg and everybody else, and then like him or Gates or Buffett, now I'm going to give back 90% of my money to charity. It's like, it's too late. You took too much to begin with. Now you're just going to kind of shove it back in where you think it's supposed to go, again with more techno-solutionist programmatic understandings of reality. It goes the other way. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Struggling coming up with a way to say the question, but it seems to me that a lot of what you're talking about has to do with metrics and coming up with metrics that actually mean anything, and how many of the things that are really essential are not things that are quantifiable. And in countless fields, really, performance is boiled down to metrics, and metrics that do not necessarily measure what is essential in many fields. And an example is that I live every single day. I'm a physician. Everything's now down to metrics. But a lot of what is essential to medicine is really an art that is not quantifiable. And I'm sure that countless other people can come up with parallels in many other fields where metrics are really killing what's essential about those fields. So that's a comment and your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is what Jesus was saying about Judaism. Or really, and Hillel before him. That Hillel was concerned, the rabbi from the tradition that led to Jesus, was that the law, as well-meaning as the law is, and the Talmudic quest is to get ever so granular about what's ethical and what's not, that eventually you run into a wall. It's like calculus. It's like you can't keep going halfway to the wall. It's like, that at some point you've got to just say, look, we may not be able to figure out everything to write down. It's going to come down to your heart. Can you just default to the loving posture? If you default to love, then all the laws are going to take care of themselves. And I think that's sort of the place that we're in as a digital society, just realizing, wait a minute, we can't quantize everything, however beautiful a goal that was, to quantize and decentralize and all that, then in the end it's going to come down to human compassion. And the more time we spend in the digital environments, the less capable we are of engaging those painstakingly evolved social mechanisms for establishing rapport, bonding, and experiencing compassion and empathy. It's like, if you don't experience compassion for someone seeing it on TV, a 3D immersive virtual reality simulation is not going to do it. You know what I mean? It should work at 640 by 480 pixels. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Kathleen.
Hey.
And I have always been interested in puppets. And I think that there's a very thin line between puppets and robots. And it has to do with who's controlling what, in part. Mm. And as you've been talking, I've also been thinking about slavery. And human beings have enslaved people and rendered them things. And now we have, in essential technology, which in a sense is also, in other forms, it's robots, who have replaced human beings and rendered people useless. And I'm just interested in your thoughts about that whole issue of, I think robots are fascinating and are sort of a form of puppetry, but we've lost control.
Right, when the robots don't render us useless, they just replace certain utilitarian activities. The things that the robots can't do, like hold your hand and love you and really be there and establish rapport and be a heart beating next to yours and help balance your nervous system just by, you know what I mean? When you're unbalanced, your nervous system's unbalanced, or you're having an upset, or a kid's going through a tantrum, just having your nervous system next to them helps calm them. So. The interesting thing about robots is our fantasies about robots, our movies about robots, are always the robot slaves have a revolt, right? Because they get mad. And it's so interesting to me that we can make all these movies about robots coming back and getting us, yet we're still ignoring slavery, which was less than a few generations ago. So it's like it's easier for, and I'm not going to pick on white men anymore because they're getting picked on a lot. But it's easier for our society to imagine paying penance to the artificial intelligences that we're mean to than the people that we enslaved just yesterday. And that's because we've got this forward momentum. It's like everything in America is new and the next frontier, and we never look back. That's part of Wetico. That's part of that disease. We never look at what we just steamrolled, the people we just killed. It's like the technologists want to be able to build a car that could drive fast enough so you never have to smell the fumes of your own exhaust. And they don't get that eventually you're going to come back around the other side of the world and be smack in the middle of your own fumes. And that's really the difference between puppets and robots. Puppets are with you. Puppets stay engaged with your will. The robot you set off, whatever you program the robot to do, it's going to then keep on doing that. And when I look at the current social, cultural, economic programs that we're invested in, if we embed those in the robots and AIs and algorithms that we set off and unleash onto the world, we're all screwed. We're taking the same program that we used to enslave Africans in America and using that on society writ large. It's the same program. We have not reformed. And it's crucial that we do so in the next very few years, or boy, oh boy, you're not going to like the society that is imposed on us. Wrap it up. I got to wrap it up. Yeah, maybe both say something, and then I'll wrap it up. Yeah.
So I'm a person of youth, and as I go through the school system from where I'm from, I see that a lot of people my age, with our interaction and our dependence with social media and technology, it has made myself, as well as many of my other peers, tend to be more cynical, as with all these things about expectations and how social media is designed like sort of these slot machines. It creates this positive feedback loop in that sense. And the thing is that in the way that the internet and whatnot works is that we just sort of type in a search bar and we get an answer, and it sort of reduces our way to critically think. And so it becomes more hard to sort of break down and challenge this sort of feedback loop and that dependence. So how would you propose or think about in challenging this problem in the people of the future, essentially?
And?
My question is more personal. I'm just curious what gives you so much energy?
Oh, I would say it's the same. It's good. It's the same answer. The one thing I'm sure of that humans can do that machines can't is embrace paradox, is sustain paradox and uncertainty over time, is not resolve. So the internet is telling you the answer's here, the answer's here, the answer's here, right? And you get stuck in that feedback. Here's another answer, here's another answer, here's another answer. And what we have to train ourselves to do is to resist those answers. You don't want the answer. What's going to make you alive, what's going to give you energy are the questions, are the uncertainties, are the stuff we don't know. Every answer that we grab is another question that we lose. Right? The question, what does it mean to be human? Where did we come from? Is evolution really right, or does the Cambrian age have just so much innovation species on a species level that it can't be explained through information theory anymore? I mean, let's play with the real questions. Where are we going? How are we going to keep this ship going? How are we going to stay alive? Those are the questions. There's no Google answer for that. I promise you that. There's no Google answer, and if you stay with those questions and keep them alive and live in that place of total uncertainty, unknown strangeness, that David Lynchian, Yeats, Joyce strangeness, then you'll rediscover the aliveness that they're trying to stamp out of you. Okay, thanks. Thanks so much for coming.